At the start to the end of Genesis chapter 20. I did not get to this part, I think it was 3 weeks ago now, because I think we had an intervening week. I did not get to this part in covering chapter 20. This would be the part that starts in, chapter 21. I already turned back a page. Chapter 21, starting in verse 22, because each of them are showing Abraham's interactions with the people of the land in two different situations. So we will start in the end of Genesis 21. And for the very first point, a review of what we talked about last week. So Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice because God told him to. Abraham wasn't given any details about God does not often tell why when he gives people specific direction and specific commands. My Bible reading, and in Job never understands why these things are happening, any of the purposes why this has happened. When God sends Ananias to Saul, he tells him, go here, Saul's praying, and he's seen you in a vision, and he doesn't tell him anything about why, and Ananias tries to say, Lord, you don't know what you're talking about. But all that to mention, that's very often. We know what we need to do if God gives us specific direction. We won't know why. This, as well as the whole testimony of Scripture, illustrates we can always trust God with the why. So, we go back to Genesis 21 then. At this time, Abraham is in Beersheba, the far south of what is now Judah. And in Beersheba, he is next to Abimelech with the Amorites. And he's already had one encounter with them where he lied about Sarah being his sister, and Abimelech would have taken her to wife, but God prevented that. So with that, Abimelech has treated Abraham extremely well. Abimelech regards Abraham as a prophet. Abraham, in terms of his interactions back towards Abimelech, besides that one dishonesty, which could have been very serious, he has been honorable back to Abimelech. And now we see Abimelech approaching Abraham. Last time it was Abraham going to the land where Abimelech was king. Now Abimelech is going to Abraham. Do I have a volunteer to start reading in verse 22 and read verses 22 to 26? We'll group the first 2 points together. Do I have a volunteer to read verses 22 to 26? Go ahead, Yuri. So, thank you very much. Very good reading. We have Abimelech and Phicol. They initiate this, and they basically say first, we've seen how God has blessed you. They say, God is with thee in all that thou doest. They've seen it, and not the least of the time when God protected Sarah and Abraham at Abimelech. They've seen that God is working for Abraham, and they ask Abraham to swear an oath by God to treat them according to the kindness they've shown him down 3 generations. Abimelech, his son, and his son's son. I couldn't find out if that implies that Abimelech already has children and grandchildren. It did not seem to be clear as far as what this passage is saying, but he's asking Abraham to show kindness to generations. And then he also says, thou shalt do unto me, that is, thou shalt do this kindness unto me, and to the land wherein thou sojourned. He's asking Abraham to be respectful of his land, which as far as we can tell, Abraham always is. Why would that be an issue? Abraham has a huge amount of flocks and herds, which means they eat a lot of grass and things like that. And if you let flocks or herds overgraze, they start killing the grass, and then it's going to be a problem because they'll start ruining the land. But in this case, he asks, with Phicol the general backing him up, Abimelech asks Abraham to swear an oath by God to return his kindness, and Abraham swears it. And now we have Abraham reproving Abimelech because of something that his people had done. They'd apparently violently taken a well away. The word violently means exactly that. They used force, and they took the well away from Abraham. And previously, I was thinking a couple weeks ago, maybe part of the reason why the Lord delayed it until then, that Abraham was questionable here, because look, Abimelech has treated Abraham more kindly than Abraham's treated Abimelech so far, and Abimelech is the one asking Abraham to reciprocate this kindness, and so Abraham swears, and then the next thing he does is say, and look, your servants took this well away from me. But I realized Abraham could have won in military. They took this well away from him for force. He had hundreds of trained servants. He had the Lord with him. He did not take matters into his own hands and go wipe out Abimelech's people who tried to take that well from him. He didn't reciprocate with violence there. He didn't go out and seek Abimelech to make an issue of this. He waited till Abimelech came to him and he had opportunity. But Abraham says here, look, this wasn't right. You had your people, well, apparently from Abimelech's response, it seems that Abraham is implying that Abimelech knew of this. Abimelech said, I had no idea. But that your people took this well from me, that shouldn't have happened. How do you call this kindness or something like that? And Abimelech's response in verse 26, I wot not who hath done this thing. Not the way we phrase this nowadays. It just means I have no idea. The word what is the verb form of wit, and that no longer exists in English. So he's like, basically, I have no wit, I have no idea, I have no understanding of who did this. And you didn't tell me, that's neither didst thou tell me, neither yet heard I of it, like my own people didn't tell me of this until today. So at that point, Abraham initiates a covenant. Okay, you didn't know of this. Now we're going to have a covenant, a promise that this well is mine, that I'll take ownership of it, and that we'll each regard the other's interests here. So, how does this covenant work? Here, Abraham's the one who gives Abimelech a gift. It's not both of them giving equally. Why did Abraham give Abimelech a gift and Abimelech not give Abraham? Because the covenant they're making is only on Abimelech's side, that he will make sure that his people stay away from this well. So Abraham's the one who gives the gift, sheep and oxen in verse 27. With that, before I continue, let's read verse 27 through 34. Do I have a volunteer to read verses 27 to 34? Go ahead, Pastor.
And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them unto Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, For these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, and that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well. Wherefore he called the place Beersheba, because there they swear both of them. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech rose up, and Phicol the chief captain of his host, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba, and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days.
Thank you very much. So, here, Abraham is the one giving the gift, the sacrifice, to the other party as part of this covenant, because he's requiring a promise from Abimelech. And Abimelech does not give Abraham a gift in this covenant because he's not requiring anything from Abraham. So, Abraham gives this gift. They make a covenant, meaning a promise between the two of them that this well is Abraham's. But there are 7 ewe lambs, female lambs, that are set by themselves. And Abimelech asks Abraham, what are those 7 ewe lambs by themselves meaning? Here's Abraham's response. For these 7 ewe lambs, in verse 30, these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well. Because besides Abraham's word, obviously Abimelech's people are going to tell him the opposite thing. Oh no, we didn't take any well by force from Abraham. Who would think about that? That was our well, and he's trying to take it from us. So he said, those 7 by themselves, those are my witness that I was the one who dug this well. Remember, as I mentioned before, this is a semi-desert area, meaning there are very few springs or natural sources of water. But back then, a lot less people would have lived in that area. The water table would be a lot higher. And so you could just dig a well down. If you had the bricks or stones to line the inside, you could get down to water and then line the inside so it wouldn't collapse. And that's your well. So we have Abraham saying those 7 ewe lambs are a witness. He explains the symbolism of those ewe lambs. And then he called that place Beersheba. The name is very important. What does the name Beersheba mean? The first part, beer, means well. So you have well. What does the second part mean? Sheba is the word for 7. It's the word that's close to the Hebrew Shabbat, which is the 7th day. He's saying it's the well of the 7, meaning the 7 ewe lambs he made as his witness in that oath. So Beersheba, it literally means the well of the 7, and it's talking about the 7 ewe lambs that Abraham gave to Abimelech as his promise that he was telling the truth. So they swear that covenant, which is going to give Abraham the ownership of this well, and Abimelech and Phicol return back to their lands. The next we'll see of them is when Isaac comes back to this a long time later and unstops the wells that Abraham dug, and then we have another encounter with these people. But that will be several chapters yet in the future. Any comments here before we go to the last 2 verses? Because at this point we're changing. Yes?
There's sort of 2, well, it's not called, the second one's not called a covenant, but there is a covenant that more or less be kind to each other and, deal well with each other. And then the second one has to do with the well itself, where they sort of made an oath. It's not really a covenant, but it's...
Absolutely. And I think of the first one as being an oath, and the second one as being a covenant between them.
Oh, the second, okay.
That's what I think of when I think of verse 27. Abraham took sheep and oxen, gave them unto Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. This is about Abraham and the well. It's not about the promise before. That happened in verse 24, when Abraham said, I will swear. So he swore an oath like Abimelech and Phicol wanted him to.
Okay, and then from 25 down, it's about the well.
Yes.
Okay, I see.
So, very good point. Brings us to verse 33. Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba, has the idea of an altar. What would you say? The word meaning place of worship in Hebrew is literally this word. It's pretty much certain he did not actually plant one of those sacred groves where the word is actually Asherah. You'll see it in the Judges and the Kings. When you see the word Asherah, it's that word, and it's a place for pagan worship. He's almost certainly not trying to worship the Lord in an idolatrous way. It's using that word to mean its general meaning of place of worship, meaning there is an altar there. We have an altar in Beersheba, and he's not just using the altar to make a statement. He's not just using the altar because it's special. He's using the altar to call on the name of the Lord. And that's very important, Old Testament and New Testament. The idea of calling on the name of the Lord is both to talk to the Lord as a person, as well as I think of, I will call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, so shall I be saved from my enemies. Calling upon the Lord for deliverance. But in this case, he's presenting supplication before God. He stays down here, it says many days. How many days are we talking about? From chapter 21 to chapter 22, we're skipping probably somewhere around 10 years. And from chapter 22 to 23, we're skipping another like 25 years. So there's big time periods. There's a long time where Abraham is down in the south around the area of Beersheba. There was one more thing I wanted to mention there. The altar is actually used for worship, not as a symbol. In fact, I think every single time we see Abraham make an altar in the Bible, it's for worship, to worship God, not just as a symbol.
Is that, you mentioned about the grove or the tree. Is the whole Hebrew word planted a grove? Is that one?
So, I did not look up that specifically. I thought immediately of grove and knowing how this is translated. There's been another occurrence back in the book where it clearly mentions it said planted a grove, and right after it's like, that was the first altar that he had made, or I think that was the second altar that he had made. But I think it is very likely based on the word and based on how people lived. When you're going to live in a place for a while, you put trees there because then they'd be growing, they'd be shade and such. So I would very much say this has the idea of planting trees too, as well as worship, but he's not making a sacred grove to put carvings on the trees and such. It's not that type of thing.
So maybe it has the concept there. He was going to make this his home.
Yes.
Yes.
And we have, by implication, he stayed here from chapters 20 to 23, probably at least 30 years, up to like 35 years. So long time here, enough time that if you plant trees, they're going to be big by the time you're left. So,
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment there and the question. That brings us to Genesis chapter 23. Genesis chapter 23. And do I have a volunteer to read verses 1 through 3? Go ahead, Obi. Thank you. So, we have start of chapter 23, unexpectedly, right after chapter 22 is ended with Abraham's extended family. He hears news of them. Chapter 23, Sarah passes away. If she's 127, she was 90 when Isaac was born. So Isaac is 37. At 127, she passes away in Kirjath Arba. If you turn to the back side of the outline, the X that I have placed there is where Kirjath Arba is. The name Kirjath Arba is otherwise mentioned in the Bible in Joshua. It's named after the giants who would live there before Israel got there. So at this time, as far as we know, there were no giants there. Then it's named Kirjath Arba after the families of giants here. And this is the land that Caleb asked for from Joshua to clear in the time of Joshua. But we know exactly where this is, not just the land, because it says the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And we know exactly where the city Hebron is, southwest of Jerusalem, between somewhere around 20 miles. So that's where that X is. That's where Abraham is. And so obviously Sarah dies. He mourns and weeps for her in verse 2. And verse 3, Abraham stood up before his dead, meaning he stopped immediately mourning. So possibly the same day, but culturally you could often mourn for a week or so. I would assume immediately, because he's asking to bury her, that this is the same day. There is no way this culture or any other culture that practiced burial would neglect the burial of a dead body. So that's what stood up from before his dead means. He stopped immediately mourning. Spake unto the sons of Heth. Who are the sons of Heth? We know from the genealogy that Heth is one of the sons of Canaan. So we're talking about Canaanites here, the sons of Heth, a branch of the family of Canaan, and all these people are settled here. We're not talking about semi-desert anymore. Hebron is one of the fertile areas of Israel. So things very much growing. It's a great place to settle. There's settlement here, and they're Canaanites. Any comments on the first 3 verses? Yes.
This Heth, H-E-T-H.
Very good question. Got the question, who is Heth? He is one of the sons of Canaan. And I did not look up all the sons of Canaan. I think there were 8 mentioned, but he is one of the sons, not the oldest. It's Mizraim, Put, and then... Wait, I'm thinking of the sons of Ham. Sons of Canaan, there are 8, but with that, we have one of those is Heth. So by saying sons of Heth, we're saying these people are Canaanites. So, any other thoughts? Brings us to verses 4 through we will go verses 4 through 9. Verses 4 through 9, go ahead, Steve.
I am a stranger and sojourner with you. Give me a position of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, Hear us, my Lord, thou art a mighty prince among us, and choice of our sepulchres, bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee this sepulchre, that thou mayest bury thy dead. Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth, and communed with them, saying, If it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me to Ephraim the son of Sohar, that he may give the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, and which is in the end of his field, for as much money as the worth that he shall give it me for possession of a burying place amongst you.
Thank you very much. So, Abraham asks the sons of Heth in verse 4. First, he mentions, I'm a stranger and a foreigner, meaning a stranger, that he's not a Canaanite. Sojourner is the idea. He doesn't own property here. He's just roaming nomadic. And he says, so give me a possession of a burying place that I may bury her. Because obviously he's nomadic. He doesn't own property. There's no spots he has. And burying a dead body on somebody else's property is something, in any situation, you would never do except in an emergency. So here he's saying, so I want a property so I can bury Sarah. And so we find out later, this is at a gate. We're not given the exact name of the city. The city may be Machpelah, considering that's mentioned a couple times. But this is at a gate. He goes to the gate. The elders are there, and he talks to them and says, so give me a possession that I can bury her. And their response is, in verse 6, Hear us, my Lord. It's the respectful title, not talking about him as God. Thou art a mighty prince among us. So they're basically saying, we're going to treat you like royalty. In the choice of our sepulchres, bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. We see in verse 6 the start of reverse haggling. In a lot of Middle Eastern cultures, the idea of when you want to buy something, haggling over it back and forth to establish the price is considered very important, and it's considered part of your relationship with the person you're haggling with, is how far you will go. Here, this starts reverse haggling. Each one is trying to say, look, I'll give you exactly what you want. I'm not concerned for what I want here. So they said, here, take the choice of our sepulchres. None of us is going to stop you. Just pick a tomb that any of us has, and that's yours. Reverse haggling, you just take our property, it's not a problem. So then he responds, verse 7, treating them once again with great reverence, because Abraham almost certainly is older than all of them. And in that type of culture, age is very important. Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even the children of the Heth. So he bows down to them, showing them respect, and he communed with them. The word communed just means talked. We're not talking about the modern meaning of the word communed. He had communication with them, is the idea. Saying, if it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, saying, look, you just told me that I can take a tomb, so you want me to bury Sarah as well. Hear me and entreat for me to Ephron the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is in the end of his field. For as much money as it is worth, he shall give it me for a possession of a burying place among you. So I said, okay, you talk to Ephron, let him give me the cave and the property, and I'll give him as much money as it's worth. Once again, reverse haggling. I want this tomb exactly. Presumably it's not the choicest tomb, because as we find out, Ephron is a foreigner as well. He's a Hittite. But I want this tomb, and I'll buy the whole property from him for as much as it's worth. So that's that part. I'm seeing if there's any other points that I had to mention. Basically, Abraham counter-offers saying, I'll take this tomb out there and I will buy it. I won't let you give it to me. We don't know at all who Zohar is, although obviously the people there knew. We would know that Zohar was a Hittite, since Ephron is mentioned as being a Hittite later. And I guess I can talk about what that means right now. So, Hittites are very well known biblically. One of the reasons they're well known is they were considered a civilization the Bible had made up until about the very early 1900s. Because there was no archaeological evidence of the Hittites, and the Hittites are mentioned as being very great. They're mentioned as owning certain parts of the areas, like over a time span of several hundred years in the Bible, owning certain parts of the Promised Land. They're mentioned as having other kings in tribute to them. They're mentioned as the kings of Syria were afraid of them. And you continue. Like, these are big guys, and people are like, we've never found a Hittite city. We've never found any other country that talks about the Hittites. The Bible obviously made this up. Until what happened is very early, I think it was very late 1800s, they excavated the city. Very early 1900s, they realized what it was. In Turkey, the Hittites are not in the Promised Land. They're in Turkey. The center of their empire was there, with the capital city of Hattusis. And they were so powerful, they owned most of Turkey. And in the height of their power, whenever they became particularly strong, they would go down to the Promised Land and they would be conquering other nations. And that's the times where they were scared. They were the best civilization of their day at working with iron. So they had very powerful iron weapons. They weren't necessarily strong in people. But all that to say, this is before the Hittite Empire, where we're talking about the Hittites as the people. They're not Canaanite. They're, if I remember correctly, of Japheth. And Ephron just happened to decide to settle here. He's a wanderer too. And that's where it's referenced. But by this point, we have huge amounts of archaeological evidence of the Hittites. And people have not brought that up over the last 110 years as a place where the Bible is wrong. Because we now know in the height of their power, they were as strong as Egypt in the height of her power. And putting that up, this is the first mention that I know of Hittite in the Bible. So, any questions before we go on to Abraham and his reverse haggling with Ephron the Hittite? Okay. Do I have a volunteer to read verses 10 through 18? Verses 10 through 18. Go ahead, Lorelei. Very good. Very good. So we have Ephron here dwelt among the children of Heth. So he's living with them in verse 10. It says, Ephron the Hittite, so we know he's from the Hittites, answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even of all that went into the gate of his city. That's where we know this is happening at a city gate. Now Ephron is here, he's been summoned, and his answer to Abraham, when Abraham said, I'll give you the full price of the property and the tomb that's on it so I can bury Sarah, his answer is in verse 11, basically Abraham, no, you're going to give me too much. Hear me, I'll give you the field, and the cave that there is therein, I give it thee. In the presence of the sons of my people, give I it thee, bury thy dead. So you won't hear anything from Abraham. He just says, no, I'll give you that entire field and the cave. Go bury Sarah. And now we have Abraham making his next request. He bows himself down again, just like he did in making the previous request in verse 12. And verse 13, he spake unto Ephron and the audience of the people of the land. This is Abraham's response. If thou wilt give it, if you give me this property, I pray thee, hear me, listen to me. I will give thee the money of the field. Take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. So it's like, okay, if you will give me that field for free, I'll give you the money it was worth, and that will be my gift to you. And so that's Abraham's counter response. And in verse 14, we have Ephron's answer to that. But Ephron gives the field to Abraham, and Abraham says, okay, I'll give you as a gift the money that field was worth. Any questions here before we go on to verse 14? Okay. Do I have a volunteer to read verses 14 through 18? Verses 14. Go ahead, Matilda. Thank you. We'll read verses 19 and 20 later. Thank you very much. So, Abraham saying, I'll give you the money it's worth. So Ephron answers Abraham, land's worth 400 shekels of silver. And says, what is that betwixt me and thee? I don't care about the money. Go ahead and bury Sarah. And once Abraham purchases the property before burying her, 400 shekels of silver, we're talking about somewhere around 10 to 15 pounds of silver. How much money is this worth? Only $6,000 now. It surprised me. Now, I was thinking, in most of the cultures of the world, $6,000 is a huge amount of money. In America, we think of $6,000 like, that's not a small amount of money, but that's not a big amount either. Obviously, not that many people are living here. Land is cheap. But Abraham weighs out that money in the currency of the merchants. And what we see there, one, is that there is a standard currency, not a coinage yet. Coins were not invented, but there's a standard currency. Like you use this weight when you're giving silver, and this much silver is 1 shekel. And so he weighed out 600 silvers using the currency of the merchants, using the type of scales they would have, or balances. So we see established currency, which somewhere between 10 and 20 pounds. There's different countries have different weights for a talent, and a shekel's weight is based on the weight of a talent. And so there's a spectrum there. But all that to mention, he gets the silver weighed out. There's a merchant's currency, which I'll say people who are generally evolutionists don't know very ancient archaeology would say that currency and such was invented quite a bit later, like as in the era right before the Greeks came to power. But we have that part here. And then we see in verse 17, there's a deed that in the presence of the elders, there's a deed made with the field, the cave, all the trees, and then the borders, the edge of the land all the way around, given to Abraham as a deed, which implies that it was written. And until a very short time ago, like 20 years ago, there was a lot of argument about whether or not there was written language even in the time of Moses. Like, how could Moses have written down the Pentateuch? And we realized the Sumerians are more recent than we thought, and with that, Abraham was Sumerian. He's from Ur of the Chaldeans, which was right in the Sumerian Empire, which is the first, along with Egypt, they were the first two empires of the world. And the Sumerians knew how to write. The reason we know so much about them is they're in the middle of the desert there. Their clay tablets and such got preserved, and it's all their financial records. They kept all of that from even before the time of Abraham. It's definitely true here, the Bible says it, that there was a deed made for Abraham in the land of Canaan. They also had written language. Just in this case, we're talking about it's a fertile area. Anything that was there rotted, clay crumbles, there's water here. So we don't have records of a culture here that knew written language, but we have this clear testimony they did and had a deed here. And so Abraham purchases this property. This is the only part of the promised land that Abraham owns. In his whole life, God says, I'm giving it to you and your descendants. It will be an everlasting possession. And this is the only part that Abraham ever owns his whole life. The other thing to be aware of as we continue our study of Genesis is who else is buried here. The people who are buried here are not necessarily the people you would think, but be mindful of that. This place shows up a lot in the book of Genesis. So now, with time, I will read the verses 19 and 20, briefly comment on them, and then we'll close in prayer. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And the field and the cave that is therein were made sure unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place by the sons of Heth. So we have Abraham buries Sarah in this cave, which is now used for a tomb, in this field, in Hebron, which is basically it's the center of Judah. We're talking about the center of Judah, still on the south of Israel, but the center of the land that is Judah, that's where this tomb is. And we're going to see multiple other members of the patriarchs' families being buried here. Last thing, so what does this chapter show? It shows God's blessing of Abraham being very evident to Abimelech. It shows Abimelech's and Abraham's very close relationship. And it also shows the honor that even the Canaanites give to Abraham in this part. And then it shows, I'll say, the lesson of Hebrews 11. That is, Abraham was looking for a city with foundations, the builder and maker being God, because he was not looking for buying all the land he can on this earth, start building the cities. He was trusting God. He lived in tents. He trusted God's promise. Any final thoughts before we close in prayer? Okay. Let's close in prayer. Dear Lord God, I thank you for this study. Thank you for the clear testimony of Abraham, both in even following the golden rule, treating others the way you'd want to be treated. We thank you for his faith in you, the clear example of your blessing here, and the opportunity to study your word and see in all these circumstances, places, and people that you have spoken the truth for our admonition. We thank you again. In Jesus' name, amen.